I'm Anil Kumar. Welcome to my website, Global Math Institute. We are providing special training to students worldwide. You can always send requests on my email to register. The courses are being offered for students to learn individually or in a group. Discounted rates can be offered, so you can inquire sending email on the given address. In this video, we are going to talk about ratios and proportions, which is good for grade 7 and 8 students. This video will be divided into two parts. In part 1, we'll talk about ratios and proportions, equivalent ratios, proportions and the missing terms, strategy to find simpler ratios, working with three terms, and we'll take up practice test questions. We'll touch upon the word problems. In part 2, we'll extensively work on word problems and exam review. So let's start with this basic understanding of what is a ratio and what is a proportion. To begin with, let me ask you one question, right? Which is, what is the difference between ratio and proportion? Tell me. So what is the difference between ratio and proportion, right? So that is a very basic question which we need to answer, and I find that many students don't really understand it. So while we are going through this video, it's very important for you to understand the difference between ratio and proportion and then see how proportions really help us to solve problems, okay? Let's begin with some basic terms, which is what is ratio after all. So ratio is comparison of two or more quantities measured in the same units. So the key point here is measured in the same units. That really means that the ratio does not have a unit. Do you understand? Okay. Now terms. Term is the number that represents the quantity in a ratio. So as you have seen, the term is the quantity and that is the quantities being compared, right? So those quantities which are being compared are called the terms. Equivalent ratios represent the comparison, right? So equivalent ratios represent the comparison. If they are exactly equal, they are equal, right? Now, how do we get them? So equivalent ratios are obtained by multiplying or dividing each term by a number called scale factor. So when we have ratios, for example, if I have a ratio which is 3 by 4, and if I multiply both by, let's say, 2, then 2 is your scale factor and I get 6 over 8, correct? So 6 over 8 is an equivalent ratio. And the scale factor in this case is 2, since both the terms were multiplied by 2. You get the idea, right? Now, let's see what proportion is. A number sentence representing two equivalent ratios is called proportion. So when I write like this, which is when I write 3 by 4 equals to 6 by 8, in that case, note that this is one ratio, correct? And the other one is another ratio. And in between, what do we have? We have equal to sign. So if you have equal to sign between two, then it is called a proportion, right? So a number sentence representing the two equivalent ratios is called a proportion. So the difference between ratios and proportion is, ratio is that individual part, right? And proportion is connecting the two with an equal to sign, right? That is proportion. So when you connect them, it becomes like an equation, and equation can be solved. And that is how we'll be using proportions. Perfect. Now let's take up an example to understand the concept. Height of two boys is 120 centimeter and 180 centimeters. So that is given to us. Height of two boys. So we are measuring quantities which are 120 and 180. And if we start comparing them, right? So comparison. So the idea here is to compare them. So when you measure quantities and we start comparing, the two quantities are 120 and 180 centimeter, then we get ratio. So in this particular case, ratio of their height is 120 is to 180. You get the idea. Now in this case, note that we have not included units. They cancel away, right? You could also write this as 120 over 180, right? However, writing with colon is preferred since you could compare more than two ratios. Sometimes we have mixtures, right? We could have mixtures of three things, A is to B is to C, that you cannot write in fractions. So, if there are two quantities, you could also write in fractions. Okay. Now, in this particular ratio, which is 1 is to 2, height of these brothers, the terms are 120 and 180. The two numbers which represent the height of brothers will be treated as terms, correct? Now each term can be multiplied or divided by a scale factor to get equivalent ratio. So in this case, what I'm doing here is I'm actually dividing. So in step 1, I'm dividing by 10. So when I divide by 10, 120 is to 180, it becomes 12 to 18. And then I divide by 2. So if I half it, I get 6 is to 9. And then what am I doing? I'm further dividing by 3. Now we got 2 is to 3. This ratio 2 is to 3 is the simplest form. It cannot be simplified further. So sometimes we also say, what is the simplified form? Correct? So that becomes a simplified form. Well, there could be examples where we may multiply and get a new ratio. For example, here from 2 is to 3, we multiplied by 7 and we got an equivalent ratio. Correct? So these are all equivalent ratios. Perfect. Now, how do you write proportion from what we already have? So proportion is a number sentence and that can be written as 180 is to 120 is to 180 is 2 is to 3. You can just equate, right? Or you could write in the fraction form. So that becomes a proportion. Correct? So this is proportion or this is proportion. So when you have equal to sign, then it becomes proportion, correct? So ratios connected with equal to sign. So I hope the concept is clear. Let's move and solve some questions. So these are typical questions which are based on ratios, which you'll find in any book, right? Now, example 2. Here is determine the missing terms. Missing terms in the first one, 15 is to 12 equals to 5 is to x. You have to find what x is. Then we have this one, 32 over 48 is equals to y over 12. You need to find what y is. So let us see how to solve 2a. So we have 15 is to 12 equals to 5 is to 6. Now how do we solve this? To solve this, we find the scale factor. So we'll connect the two terms which are given to us, and these terms are 15 and 5. How do we get 5 from 15? Well, we need to divide by 3. So dividing by 3 should give us equivalent ratio. So the scale factor here is to divide by 3. So we'll divide 12 by 3 to get x, correct? So we divided 12 by 3 to get x, and answer clearly is 4. So to get the value of x, what did we do? We divided this by 3. So we form an equivalent ratio and we got our answer, and now we can write down that 15 is to 12 is 5 over 4. Correct? So they both represent the same comparison, and therefore these are equivalent ratios. Correct? Now this is the question for you to do. So try this. Find the value of y. Here is another question. Let me call this as 2c, where I'm showing a similar example but with different values, since I want you to try one of these. Okay, so in this case we have 13 over 9 equals to 5 y over 45. How do we do this? We are given two values, 9 and 45, in similar positions. How do we get one from the other? So we get it by multiplying by 5. That means I have to multiply 13 by 5 to get my answer, correct? So I have to do 13 times 5 to get the value of y. That is the strategy, and that is what I did. So I multiplied 13 by 5 to get y as 65 and then wrote it as a proportion. So this statement which I have written is a proportion. So we have two ratios connected with equal to sign. Since they are equivalent ratios, it makes sense. And so we wrote this as a proportion. So I hope the example is absolutely clear. Here is example 3. It's slightly different from the previous one. We need to determine the missing terms, and we have what? We have 3 terms now. So do you see that? So now we are working with 3 terms. So as I said, ratio is comparison. Now when you are comparing the same quantities, they could be 2, they could be 3 or more, correct? So when there are 3, you have to write with this notation using colon. Now how do we find x and y values? You have to identify what is given to you. So which is in the same position. So 18 and 3, they are in the same position. So moving from left to right, we have to see how we get 3 from 18. Clearly, we have to divide by 6 to get this value. That should help us to find the value of y. Moving from 12 to y, we have to divide by 6 to get our answer. The other way to find x will be, we have to see how do you go from 3 to 18. You have to times that by 6. It is the reverse operation. So in case here, 5 should be times by 6 to get the value of x. So I hope you understand this strategy, correct? Now let's look into the solution. So we have this with two missing terms, and the missing terms are x and y. To first find the scale factor, and to find the scale factor we compare 18 and 3, and we know when you divide 18 by 6 you get 3. So the scale factor is 6. We'll divide 12 by 6 to get the y value, which is 2. Now, on the other side, we have to find x. That is to say, we have to move from here to there. So we can compare 3 to 18, which is times 6. So when I multiply by 6, I get my answer. And so I multiplied by 6 the number value 5 and got the value of x as 30. Perfect. So now you understand how to do ratios when 3 terms are involved. Let's take question number 4 now, which is determine the missing term. Now this time, I'd like you to pause the video, answer this particular question, and then look into my suggestions. 24 to 20 equals to x times 35. X is to 35. Now you see we have to link the terms 20 and 35. Now that is not easy. What can we do? Now in such cases, you have to get the simplest form. Then it is easy to find. Do you understand? So what you could do is you can go back and divide. Both could be divided by 4, right? So when you divide them by 4, you get 6 is to 5. You get the idea. What did we do? We divided both by 4. So when you divide by 4, you get 6 is to 5. And now we know how they are related. You get the idea, right? So now we know we can go from 5 to 35 times 7. And so we get the value of x as 6 times 7. Correct? So that is the strategy which we have done here. So important thing in solution 4 is it is better to simplify the ratio first and then find the missing term. So 24 is to 20 is given to us as x equals to 15. Find the simpler equivalent ratio. How did we figure this out? We have divide by 4, the common factor. So when you divide by 4, in that case, this could be written as 6 is to 5. 24 by 4, right? Divide this by 4 and the other thing also by 4. Ratio remains same. So when you divide 24 by 4, you get 6 and 20 divided by 4 is 5. And so you get a new ratio. 6 is to 5 equals to x is to 35. Now, we'll work with this. You can see that 5 is 7 times 35. So the multiplication factor is 7. So you can multiply 6 by 7 to get your answer. And that's what has been done here. So 6 times 7 is 42. So the missing term here is 42. Now this is a very important question. Directly, you cannot see the answer. However, if you simplify, then it is much, much simpler. Now, here are some practice questions for you. I'd like you to pause the video, answer these questions, and then move forward. So we have 4 practice questions. Question number 1, write 2 equivalent ratios for each. Correct? So 4 is to 3. To find equivalent ratios, I can times them by 2, right? So I could write 8 is to 6. I could also write them times 3. 12 is to 9. So these are equivalent ratios. Similarly, 5 is to 7 means 10 is to 14, or I could write 15 is to 21. Let's keep it simple, right? Now in case of 27 is to 18, I could also write this as 270 is 280. That is also equivalent. I could also divide them by, let's say, 9. So dividing by 9, what do you get? I could also write this as 9 times 3 and 9 times 2. So 3 is to 2. So that ways you can write many equivalent ratios. Next one, 10 is to 8 means 5 is to 4. And then you can multiply 5 is to 4 by another number, let's say 3. So you get 15 is to 12. So that is how you can get equivalent ratios. So idea here is use scale factor, correct? Okay. Second example, write missing terms. So we have to find the value of y. Now how do you find this value? You can pause the video and answer this particular question. It is slightly tricky. And in this case, you have to find the value of x. Take your time, okay? And this is how I will do it. So since we have this term, we have to find the relation between 12 and 18. So we have to get a smaller number, right? But in this case, we need to find y. So rather, we have to see how we go from 8 to 12. Since we need to find y, which will come from 3 times the same scale factor. So to find the scale factor, what am I going to do? I will divide 12 by 8, right? So 12 by 8, you could say 12 by 8 is 4. If you divide by 4, okay, let's divide by 4. We get 4 times 3 and 4 times 2. So that is your scale factor. Or you could write this as 1.5. 3 by 2 will also work for you. You could write 1.5. Now, you have to multiply 3 by 1.5. So do 1.5 times 3. When you do that, 3 times 5 is 15, 1, and you get 4.5 as your answer. So in this case, you know y is 4.5. Is that clear to you? So sometimes you may have to involve fractions or decimals, as I did. So you could either work with fractions or with decimals, and you may write down the answer. Correct? So you could write this as 4.5, or also you could say this 3 times 3 by 2, which is 9 by 2. So either could be the answer for y or 9 by 2. Is that clear to you? So both will be the correct answers for the given question. Right. So the next one here is to get the value on this side. So we have to see how do we come from right to left. So that scale factor is 7. So let's multiply by 7 and get our answer. So we get x equals to 70. Is that clear? Now here is another practice question which involves three ratios. You can pause the video, answer this question, and then look into my suggestions. Okay, so the values which are given to us, which can be compared easily, are 4 and 12. How are they related? Moving from left to right, for example, 4 times 3, that is the value. So you can get the value of y 3 times 3, right? So we can say y is equals to 3 times 3, which is 9. To get the value of x, we have to move the other way. That is to say, we have to come from 12 to 4, correct? 12 to 4. When you go that side, you're dividing by 3. It is a reverse operation. So the value of x will be 21 divided by 3, which is 7. So x is 7, right? So when you go in this direction, you have to divide by 3, correct? Reversing the direction reverses the operation. The next one here is 15 is to x is to 12 and y is to 18 is to 8. Now, the values which you can compare are the last positions are given to you, 12 to 8. So how are they related? 12 to 8. So now you could divide 8 by 12. You could do that, or you write this in fraction. So let's do it once again. So when you go on this side, it is 8 divided by 12, which you can divide by 4, we get 2 over 3. So 2 over 3 is your scale factor when moving right. So in case of that, to get the y value, so you can say y equals to 15 times 2 over 3. Now you can simplify this. It goes 5 times, so y is equal to 10. Do you see that? So we get the value of y as 10. So when you go from here and multiply by 2 over 3, you get y equals to 10 as your answer. When you to go to the reverse direction, then definitely it is scale factor will be 3 over 2. So we have 18 times 3 over 2, and that is equals to x, and that is equal to, we can simplify this also, dividing, get 9, 9 times 3 is 27. So we get here x equals to 27 and y equals to 10 as our answer. Correct? So when there are three ratios involved, you have to work both ways. Example 4, practice question. We are given you proportions in the form of fractions, correct? So the question here is, find the missing terms in each proportion. So you need to take some time to do this question. I'll do some of them for you. For example, let's take part C. In part C, we want to find the value of x. We can see that if I'm going from left to right, I'm actually dividing by 2. So when I divide by 2, what do I get? I get x equals to 4 divided by 2, which is 2. So my answer is 2. Now let's take here. So when you go from 3 to 12, but you need to find the x. You have to come from the other side. So 12 to 3 is again dividing by 4. So when you divide 20 by 4, you get what? When you divide 20 by 4, you get 5. And therefore, we can write x is equal to 5. Clear? That is how it should be solved. Question G is slightly tricky. Now in this case, directly finding an answer is not easy. However, you can simplify this. So write simplified form. So 30 over 25 could be written as 6 over 5. And now it is easier, correct? So to get the value of x, we can go from 6 to 24 by times by 4. And therefore we get x equals to 5 times 4, which is 20. And that is how you're going to do it. So this is the way to solve such questions. Clear? Let's end with a word problem. In part 2, we'll extensively look into word problems. An example for us is Ratio of boys to girls in a class is 2 is to 3. 5a. Find the number of boys if there are 12 girls in the class. 5b. Find the number of girls if there are 10 boys in the class. 5c. How many girls and boys are in the class with 30 students? Okay, so when there is a question like this, we can work boys to girls, right? So ratio of boys to girls. Let's define variable b and g, and that is equal to 2 is to 3. So less number of boys, more number of girls. 2 is to 3. Okay. Now 5a is what? 5a is find the number of boys if there are 12 girls. So we know the number of girls is 12 and we need to find the number of boys. That is the question. Now clearly we have to see the scale factor. So when you go from 3 to 12, we know it is times 4. So when you do 4 times 2, we get 8, and therefore we have boys will be for 12 girls, correct? So that is how you have to do it. Now let's take the next example, which is we are again given the ratio 2 is to 3 for boys and girls, but this time we are saying find the number of girls. We don't know what the girls are, but we know that there are 10 boys. We know this number is 10, right? So equivalent ratio. So the concept is equivalent ratios. Okay, so how do you get from 2 to 5? Well, clearly it is times 10. So times 5, you get 10. So times 5 will give us 15. So we know that this time we should have 15 girls. Let me write down the answer here, 15 girls. Right, 15 girls in this case. In the first case, find the number of boys. So boys were 12. 8 boys, right? Right. Now the third question, 5c, is how many girls and boys in a class of 30 students? How will you do this part? Total is 30. Oh, total is 30. That means when we are saying 2 is to 3, then what is the total? Total is 5. Do you see that? So we have boys, we have girls, and the total. That is what it is. So when we are given total number of students, add one more column, which is total, right? That is the key. We are given this time that the total is 30. We need to find the number of boys and girls. Now clearly the scale factor from 5 to 30 is 6. So multiply each term by 6. So when you multiply 6 times 2 is 12, 6 times 3 is 18, we get the number of boys and girls. So we get 12 boys and 18 girls. Does make sense to you, right? That is how we have to do it. Now the word problems which are there for you practice, which we are going to take up their solutions in part B are here. So exam practice question number 6. A bag contains 2 red, 3 blue and 4 green marbles. What is the ratio of red to green marbles in simplest form? What is the ratio of blue marbles to total number of marbles? And C is how many green marbles should be added so that the ratio of blue to green marble becomes 1 is to 3. So that is a thinking question, right? You can pause the video, copy the question, solve it. The next question here is, here is question number 7 to 10. $540 is distributed among Anil, Ben and Cindy in the ratio of 2 is to 3 is to 4 respectively. Find the amount received by Ben. Okay. Question 8. Side lengths of a triangle are in the ratio of 1 is to 2 is to 3. Find the length of the longest side if the perimeter is given to you as 24 centimeters. Question number 9. A fertilizer contains nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium in the ratio of 8 is to 7 is to 5. Calculate the mass of each ingredient in the bag of 50 kg fertilizer. Question 10. A bag contains oranges, apples, and bananas in the ratio of 3 is to 2 is to 4. Find the number of fruits in the bag if it has 2 dozen bananas. So we're given the bananas, but we want to find total number of fruits in the container. All right. So these are the questions for you to try. So I like to complete the video at this stage. I hope you understand the whole concept about ratios and proportions. You've also seen how do we solve questions based on ratios and proportions. We also had some test examples which are there for you to explore. In next part, we'll look into their solutions also. I hope you find this interesting and useful. Feel free to write your comments, share your views, and if you want to join the learning process with Anil Kumar, definitely here is the email which you can use, send an email, and then register for the courses. Thanks for your time and all the best.